And this is where the Solicitor General of the United States lied to the Supreme Court to get that case thrown out. He said if anybody in the criminal case in court was the NSA data was used against them, that they would be told so they could challenge it in the court of law. That was a lie. No one has ever been told.
Right.
And that's on the web. Everybody, if you Google it, but mainstream media won't tell you this because they don't want you to know this kind of stuff. I mean, they don't want you to know the truth. After we left in the end of October of 2001, Tom Drake, who's still working there, took our software and ran it against the entire NSA database. Mm-hmm. And all that data about the preparations and timing, the date for the attack was given also. All of that was in the data they already had, but they didn't know they had it because they didn't have a process that would allow them to see in through that massive amount of data that they had, which was relatively small compared to what they're doing now. And be able to see the threat coming. Well, our process picked it out right away. So they would have known well in advance the date of the attack and basically who was in the attack.
Do they all shun you like you're a traitor, the plague, or what?
Yeah, the establishment treats me like that. Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to make sure that everybody that needs to gets the information to put these people in jail. Because that's where they belong.
Welcome to another episode of Independent Thought and Freedom, where we have conversations with some of the most interesting people around the world who are shaking up politics, society, economies, and ideas. We've had some amazing guests on this program, including The Saker, Paul Craig Roberts, Sheikh Imran Hussein, E. Michael Jones, Cynthia McKinney, and more. If you'd like to support us to reach our next goal of actually putting together live events where we bring some of my best guests side by side on one stage, please consider becoming a monthly subscriber on Patreon. You'll find the link below. Also, if you are an author or researcher with important ideas to share with the world and want to have a greater impact, I'm offering a free masterclass, 3 steps on how to leverage your intellectual authority to become a media personality. The link for that class is in the description as well. And now, on to this week's show. Welcome to Independent Thought and Freedom. We live in a world of mass surveillance and big data that in some ways not even George Orwell could think up in his nightmares. It doesn't seem like we live in the hellish world of 1984, however, at least not in this part of the world. It's more like Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, where people in the West are controlled by the manipulations of pleasure, psychology, drugs, sex, hedonism, big government, big banks, and big corporations. There's an illusion of freedom and choice, but really there's control, something like the Matrix. Now, is this merely a conspiracy theory? Are things really that bad? Well, today I'm pleased to have on our podcast Mr. William Binney, who has been at the forefront, even before Edward Snowden and perhaps even Julian Assange, at exposing the extent and nature of government surveillance and some deeply disturbing aspects about it. William Binney is a former high-level National Security Agency intelligence official who, after his 2001 retirement after 30 years, blew the whistle on NSA surveillance programs. His outspoken criticism of the NSA during the George W. Bush administration made him the subject of FBI investigations that included a raid on his home in 2007. Even before Edward Snowden's NSA whistleblowing, Binney publicly revealed that the NSA had access to telecommunications companies' domestic and international billing records, and that since 9/11, the agency has intercepted some 15 to 20 trillion domestic communications. The Snowden disclosures confirmed many of the surveillance dangers that Binney, without benefit of documents, had been warning about under both the Bush and Obama administrations for years. I truly welcome Mr. Bill Binney. It's an honor to have you here.
It's good to be with you.
Thanks for joining us. By the way, where exactly are you joining us from?
Actually, I'm 4 miles from NSA headquarters, just south of Baltimore.
Okay.
So I watch them every day, you know.
Yeah. So you're not currently. I'm just wondering about your status, because like, you know how Edward Snowden is still in Russia, and you were under investigation. So what's your status right now, given you're a whistleblower? You know.
Well, the status is this: I could have been tried and under the espionage laws, like Edward Snowden is being charged with.
Yeah.
But I had assembled evidence of malicious prosecution on the part of the Department of Justice of the United States. And so I threatened them with the evidence, and I told them what the evidence was that I had, so they ran away because I had them dead to rights.
Wow.
Fabricated evidence and to get in an affidavit to get a warrant. They fabricated evidence in the warrant. They also fabricated evidence in a draft indictment of us. And I had all that evidence. Plus, somebody in the DOJ felt so bad about what they were doing to us, they sent us a copy of their draft indictment.
Wow.
So I had all of that in the background, ready to hit them in court. So I told them, let's go to court. And I told everybody to tell your lawyers that when they take us to court, because I wasn't alone, there were other NSA whistleblowers.
Right.
We were all being charged with the same kind of thing. So I said, tell your lawyers whenever we go to court, I'm going to charge them with malicious prosecution and hope. Here's all the evidence. So I gave them the evidence too. And so they ran like chickens and cowards, because that's what they are. They're criminals.
Yeah. That's
a felony to fabricate evidence, to lie to a court. That's perjury. That's a felony. You know.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like the worst totalitarian governments that they claim to be against.
Yeah, well, I refer to NSA as the new Stasi agency, and the U.S. government is drifting into Gestapoism.
Yeah.
You know, because of the take for example the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, Section 1021 says that the president can declare anybody a terrorist threat and have the military incarcerate them indefinitely without any due process. Well, that's exactly what Special Order 48 says after the Reichstag fire that the Nazis issued in 1933.
Right. And when was that law put in place?
The National Defense Authorization. That came under Obama. I think the first iteration was 2012.
Wow. So under Obama too, huh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's both parties. It doesn't seem to make any difference.
Absolutely.
It's all driven by the deep state.
Yeah.
Well, I assume we'll get into this.
Definitely. I mean,
because they're warmongers. I mean, what they want to do is control what we do around the world. More wars, more, because that's profitable.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who suffers. It's just the profits for them. That's the problem. That I see.
Yeah.
Really.
Absolutely. I mean, now I'm very interested in your path, towards this, because you started around the time working with the NSA around the time of the Vietnam War. Am I correct?
Actually, I started before that. I went into the Army in 1965. So from 65 to 69, I was in the U.S. Army.
Right.
And they sent me to, I was in the intelligence, so I went into the Army Security Agency, and it's really NSA CSS. The CSS is Combined Security Services, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard components of SIGINT.
Mm-hmm.
That all falls under the Charter for NSA. So that's why the director of NSA is a general or an admiral.
Okay.
So I was in there from 65. I got out in 69, and then early 70, I started as a civilian at NSA. But in the process, I was watching the Vietnam War. It was really, we had 2 months notice of the upcoming Tet Offensive, and we knew it was going to be from the Delta to the DMZ.
Yeah.
So that was well known, but nobody paid any attention to it. Because they just figured out we have so much power, they can't do anything anyway. So it's
more
power.
arrogance.
Yeah, it's the arrogance of power.
Yeah.
And so, a bunch of people got killed because of that ignorance and negligence, what I called it. Now, in World War II, we fired people for that.
Yeah.
We seem to have lost the ability to hold people accountable.
Yeah.
Except I refer to it as the DOJ is the Department of Just Us. Right. We do not hold those people who are just us accountable. We hold everybody else accountable.
Right, right. So now, so you after the war, you worked with the Vietnam War. I mean, you worked with the NSA, correct? And
Yeah.
I mean, you were. To me, I interviewed Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson too, and he had a fascinating story, starting similarly around the same time, and his own sort of journey to realize, what he was working with. Is an interesting story in itself, and you probably have an interesting story in your journey as well, because you would have been involved in a lot of different stuff during the Cold War, probably in other countries, Nicaragua, perhaps. Were you?
Well, most of my career at NSA, which was a little over 32 years, as a civilian, was. It was basically against the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact.
Okay.
So up until the 1990, when it fell apart, that was primarily my analysis, and was directed against those targets. But after that, eventually, see, I was the technical director of that area. So when the digital revolution was occurring, late 80s, early 90s, the explosion of the internet and phone calls and digital mobile phones and things of that nature. Then eventually I became the technical director of what I like to call is the world.
Yeah.
That was a good title. The world. But it was actually officially the Office of the Military Intelligence and Geopolitical Analysis of the World.
Yeah.
So I could legitimately say I was the technical director of the world.
Okay, well, right. Yeah. No, that's an amazing background. But now, you became a whistleblower in 2001, correct? And that's after your retirement?
Yeah, I went directly to the House Intelligence Committee. I stayed in channels like Senator Feinstein has said you should have stayed in channels. Well, that's exactly what I did, and others who were coming out did. And that got us attacked by the FBI and the Department of Justice.
Yeah.
That's so much for staying in channels. That doesn't work at all. All it does, here's the guy blowing the whistle.
Yes, because I heard that, I read in your history that, when the people who you reported to in the internal whistleblowing department, they were actually giving names to the Department of Justice to prosecute for whistleblowing.
That's right. And that was the Inspector General of the Department of Defense did that.
Right.
That's right.
So did you find yourself in trouble at that point?
No, I didn't find that out until much later. And then we got a whistleblower out of the Department of Defense Inspector General's office.
Right.
And he blew the whistle on that guy who exposed the Inspector General was the one who gave our names to the FBI, saying these are probably the people who did it. That was after the New York Times article in December of 2004 exposing the warrantless wiretapping program.
Right.
But actually, they only exposed a small smidgen of what was really going on.
Right.
And we were complaining about the whole thing internally. It was not just metadata, by the way. It was content as well. So it was taking in content, phone calls, emails, short messages, banking transactions, all of that.
So now, were you working with the NSA when the attacks happened on September 11th?
Yeah, I was. Yeah. Yep.
And I understand that you were very critical of the fact that you believe it could have been prevented. Could you?
Actually, I actually know it could have been because because we had a program running that would do that. That would see that the whole idea of giving up your privacy for security has been a lie from the beginning.
Right.
That was a lie because they knew that if they simply went for bulk acquisition on everybody and everything they do, it's going to cost a lot of money, build a big empire, give you a lot of power over people all around the world, Yeah. So that's what they were really after. Cheney wanted the power to see what his political enemies were doing. This was called a Cheney blood oath inside NSA, by the way.
A Cheney blood oath?
Cheney blood oath, yeah.
Okay.
And so, it was just an absolute violation of the Constitution, First, Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments. because they were using what you were saying against you, and then not giving you due process in court of law. That's what the FBI, the DEA, and the DOJ are doing, and they know it, and they've got policy papers out saying, here's how you do this. They call it a parallel construction.
Yeah.
That means you never tell the judge, the lawyers, or the defendant, or even anybody in the court, you never put anything in writing that says the basis for the arrest was NSA data. What you do is you go out and do parallel police work to find the data that would justify the arrest to begin with.
Right.
It helps that you know where it is, okay?
Yeah.
and then you substitute that for the NSA data in the court of law. Well, that's called perjury.
Yes.
I'm right. That's fundamental perjury.
Yes.
And it's also denying this due process under the Sixth Amendment, because you are, by constitutional, your rights are to be able to address the evidence used against you in a court of law.
That's right.
That's a substitute. That's not the evidence. That's perjured data.
That's right. That's right.
And this came up, by the way, in the court case, Amnesty International versus Clapper, that made it to the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where the Solicitor General of the United States lied to the Supreme Court to get that case thrown out. He said, if anybody in a criminal case in court was the NSA data was used against them, that they would be told so they could challenge it in the court of law. That was a lie. No one has ever been told.
Right.
And that's on the web, everybody. If you Google it, but mainstream media won't tell you this because they don't want you to know this kind of stuff. I mean, they don't want you to know the truth. So let's keep everybody, uninformed or ill-informed, misinformed, so that you can manipulate them any way you want. But if you only know a certain amount of data, then you make your decision based on that data, and that's how they control your thinking and your actions. And the mainstream media is a basic part of that. They're the fundamental distributor of it.
Yeah. I mean, the whole rationale given in the mainstream media, in official accounts, and is that so after the September 11th attacks, terrorists were everywhere. We didn't know where they were, so we had to monitor everything to find the terrorists. I mean, well, one thing, the Afghanistan war is still going on. And they weren't even part. And they weren't even part of Al Qaeda in any case. The Taliban is still in power in any case, even though they weren't the ones that did it. But so that kind of falls flat on its face, in that this intelligence somehow is going to help you prosecute, this so-called war on terror.
But I didn't finish my story about how we knew. Well, because we had a program running that would demonstrate how to do this based on human behavior.
Right.
So we could use and that justified probable cause. So we could use that to do anything, and find the bad guys in the data of any type. After we left in the end of October of 2001, Tom Drake, who's still working there, took our software and ran it against the entire NSA database. Mm-hmm. And all that data about the preparations and timing, the date for the attack was given also. All of that was in the data they already had, but they didn't know they had it, because they didn't have a process that would allow them to see in through that massive amount of data that they had, which was relatively small compared to what they're doing now.
Yeah.
And be able to see the threat coming. Well, our process picked it out right away. So they would have known well in advance the date of the attack and basically who was in the attack. I mean, if you remember, Alexander said there was this call from the Yemen coordination facility for Al Qaeda to somebody in San Diego. Mm-hmm. But we couldn't tell that. That's a lie. That data was in the collection database, and the point is that when an analyst pulls it out, they minimize it. That means they blank it out.
Yeah.
So here you are as an analyst, and I'm sitting there looking at the Yemen, Al Qaeda Yemen facility is calling blank. That's someone in the United States. Okay, I need to know who that is. So I'm going to go into the collection database, find out, and because this is allowed under FISA. Right. The FISA allows you a 72-hour quick reaction takeoff. So you go right away and do it. Get that number out of a collection database, target it right away. Yeah. They didn't do that. Right, Instead, they tried to lie about it and say it wasn't this, we couldn't tell. Well, that was a lie. Yeah. It's the same with the Brits. The Brits are doing the same thing. The lawyers and the British out of GCHQ have been telling their parliament
Yeah.
They cannot tell the communications of the members of parliament in this bulk acquisition of data because, there's just too much of it.
Yeah.
Well, that's been commercially available since 2002.
Right.
And
Right.
it's with the devices they're using, and they're not doing it. So, but at least they're openly talking about what they're doing. We don't. We're still denying this.
Right. Now, there's a lot of people, who are looking critically at the whole war on terror, the 9/11, the surveillance state. They see the 9/11 as a inside job, and it was part. I know that's one theory that Paul Craig Roberts, for example, talks about, and that this was a move so that they could have this surveillance state, which was their ultimate aim. Is that your view or not? It doesn't sound like it. You seem like this was a real attack, but explain it to me.
We have the whole coordination starting out with the planning in Frankfurt or Hamburg in Germany, and then we had the players who were participating, Atta and all the bankers in Afghanistan and so on, and Dubai, and we had the whole network laid out, so we knew who was planning this, and the muscle men they hired.
Right.
They never told them they were committing suicide, though, by the way.
Yeah.
But we had the date, we had the planning, we had the movements to the airports, all of that stuff. We had it coordinated. It was all in the NSA databases.
Right.
So, and they didn't seem to follow it. So I would say this. Let me put it this way. I would think that the way they had it set up was that the process they established for the intelligence community to work with the FBI or police or anybody internally in the United States to take actions to stop things basically made it possible for that to happen.
Yeah.
So in other words, but if I were there and if I had that material when I was sitting there, I would have got on the encrypted line phone and called the FBI and told them, look, go over here and do this. People at CIA didn't do that, and they knew they had data about that, and they didn't do it.
Yeah.
So see, because when it comes to things like that, that's an immediate threat. You don't sit around and not do something.
Exactly.
Well,
because no matter what the theory about 9/11 is, and I honestly am agnostic on it. I've seen so many different things, and I'm not sure which way to go. But it doesn't matter in a sense because the outcome is the same. The outcome is that a surveillance state was put in place, and that Actually, there's even before 9/11. Right.
There's a fellow, Joe Naccio, former CEO of Quest Company Communications inside the U.S. He was approached on the 27th of February of 2001, about 7 months before 9/11, and asked by a person from NSA to turn over all the data on his customers.
Right.
So the planning for spying on internally U.S. was there even before 9/11, and they were moving in that direction to do it. The fact of the matter is that was 3 months after we had gotten our program set up to work from end to end, all the way to the end. So it was prepared at that point, and then they said, okay, now we can do the world, so let's first start with the U.S., and then that's exactly what they did after 9/11. So But they sent Joe Naccio. He said to them, okay, I'd be glad to do that, but first give me a warrant signed by a judge. Now they wouldn't do it, of course, because it's unconstitutional, right? So they didn't do that, but they went into data and they found that they manipulated and fabricated data against him too and sent him to jail for 5 years. So they put him in jail for 5 years. Now what that meant was for every other CEO of a communications company, you better do what we tell you to do, or here's what happens to you.
Right. So he was in jail for 5 years for refusing to disclose.
Well, he was willing to do it. You just had to give him a judge's signature on a warrant.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the legal way to do it.
Exactly. Wow. Now, I mean, we are.
This is the deep state in action.
That's right. So, I mean, we're talking about events 20 years and more ago now. For us, that may not be too long ago, but maybe for some listeners, it is a while ago. If we were to jump up to today, 2020, we're coming into the third decade of the 21st century. how does this relate to the impeachment on Donald Trump, the Russiagate? Because I definitely believe there's a connection, and I'm sure you.
Oh, there is definitely, yeah.
How does this relate? How does that stuff we're talking about then relate to what's going on right now?
Well, first of all, I started saying it was a fabrication in August of 2016 when they first started saying it. The reason I did that was because they didn't come out and say, here's who did it, and that's where it went. These are the people involved specifically by specific locations, you know? Because I know from all the fiber optic taps, the trace route programs, all of that exist, NSA has deployed since 2001, hundreds and hundreds of taps around the fiber optic lines around the world, picking up everything on the fibers and everything on the satellites. So, you know, they have the data. If anybody hacked it, they've got it. All they have to do is go in there and search for it and find it and say, okay, here's who did it. And it's like, if you remember about 6 or 7 years ago, the Chinese did a hack here in the United States. And then the government came out and said, oh, it came from that building in Shanghai.
Yeah.
Well, that's how you do this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If you do a hack like that, the signatures are all there and the trace routes will paste. They trace the packets through the network.
Yeah.
The billions of them. And all they need is one packet out of a communications that say, because every packet's got the routing. Yeah. So that means everything will be routed properly back to the point of origin of the request.
Right.
Well, that you get the hacker. So, but NSA is the only one basically in cooperation with GCHQ and the other Five Eyes that has the ability to basically do that anywhere in the world. So, but that was the beginning of it. From there on, Gooser 2 posted some data in the June 15th of 2016, saying here are Russian signatures in there with, you know, some Cyrillic and stuff like that implanted in there. Well, our guys doing research on it, you know, found 5 items out of that set of data that he posted on the 15th of June with Russian signatures. They found the same 5 items posted by WikiLeaks on the Podesta emails.
Right.
Those did not have the signatures of Russia.
Right.
That means Gooser 2 implanted those signatures, right? Because WikiLeaks publishes what they get.
Yeah.
Well, if they got it through a hack, the signatures would be there. Well, they're not there. So it didn't come through a hack. So, in fact, then when we looked at the DNC emails, now they posted 3 batches, the 23rd, the 25th of May, and the 26th of August, batches of DNC emails for a grand total of 35,813 emails. So I personally went through all 35,813 of them, looking at the last modified timestamp on every one of them.
Right.
And they're all ending in even numbers.
Right.
That says, very simply, that a FAT file format is in use where they read it down to a storage device like a thumb drive or a CD-ROM, and it rounds off the last modified time to an even number, the nearest even number. So that says a FAT file format was used meant it was read down to a device physically transported before WikiLeaks posted it.
Right.
Now take that into account what Kim.com what Julian Assange did, what Craig Murray said, what Cy Hirsch said about the FBI knowing who did it, you know, and it was all internally in the DNC. So the forensic evidence says it was a local download close to the DNC servers or wherever on the DNC network. And then it was transported physically before WikiLeaks posted it, so it was not a Russian hack. Yeah. It was fundamentally an inside job.
Yeah.
Same is true with Gooser 2. When you looked at the data he posted, he put the data out for the 1st of September and also for the 5th of July.
Yeah.
And that was his mistake, by the way.
Right, right.
Because then we started looking at it.
As far as I'm aware, too, WikiLeaks never hacks itself. I mean, it might receive hacked data and then publish it, but it never itself hacks.
Yeah, the Podesta emails were an example of what looked like a hack because the last modified times were even and odd mixed. There was nothing there that suggested a download. So, but with Gooser 2, We calculated the transfer. He made a big mistake. He put everything out there. It was the name of the file, the number of characters in the file, and the timestamp at the end of the file. Next file, name of the file, character count, timestamp, so on. So you can just difference of time, see the characters in between, and calculate the speed of transfer.
Yeah.
So we did that, on all of them. And the range was like from 49.1 megabytes, not bits, bytes, per second, down to about 19 point something.
Right. It just doesn't make sense. Yeah.
It just will not be supported by the internet across the Atlantic. Now, some people thought that could happen, so we said, okay, we'll try it. So we tried it from. We tried to get close to Russia, so we went to Albania and Yugoslavia, Serbia. Now Serbia, the Belgrade. And then we had a couple places in the Netherlands, and then finally we ended up with the data centers in New Jersey and London. And of course, the data centers were the highest rate we got, and that was 12 megabytes per second.
Right.
Just less than 1/4 the necessary capacity just to pass the data, not the servicing data that goes with it, just the data.
Yeah.
It was 1/4, less than 1/4 of it. So we said, this is not a hack, it's a local download too. And the fact that the Russian implants were there suggested that was a program that was used to make it look like someone else, i.e. the Russians, did the hack. Now
and
then,
and you were never invited to testify.
No.
Never,
Nope. They were too afraid that I would tell them about the big picture of the bulk acquisition, because then they would not have plausible deniability.
Right.
Okay, that's really what it's all about. But then, when we did that, we also said that, if anybody has any idea on how this can happen, tell us, and we'll even help you try to do the transfer.
Yeah.
And we have had no takers on that offer.
Now, for people who look at the mainstream media, right, and you have people like Malcolm Nance, who he really irritates me whenever I see him on TV with his certainty and his belligerence and all this. He has people who don't have time to understand all the data you're talking about. He just presents this narrative to support the mainstream narrative. That, yes, that it was hacked. It was clear. All the evidence points to it. I mean, I've heard you say that you believe that the mainstream media is an asset of the CIA. I personally agree with that.
Actually, there is some testimony to that. Ray McGovern knows somebody who heard CIA Director Casey back in 1982 or 83. Right. Say that he said after some kind of talk he gave, he had a few chosen ones around him. Yeah. So he unloaded with the truth. Okay. And he said, we have been infiltrating the mainstream media for several decades now. Right. And when we've succeeded, when most everything is believed as false. Yeah. So that's a genuine effort that's been ongoing for decades.
Yeah. To me, it seemed like it reached a new level at when the mainstream media were embedded. I'm trying to remember, was it the second Iraq War? But there was a time when I believe it was the early 2000s when the mainstream.
I think it was the 2003. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was then they started to embed, and they called it embedding the media, which is just like they are there to transmit government talking points. I don't understand any other way it can be interpreted.
Well, yeah, that means you. Isn't that patriotic? You're getting a microscopic view of the war.
Yeah.
And you get their talking points. So.
Yeah. I mean, as if you would be allowed to present any other point of view than what you've been authorized to tell. Yeah.
Well, in fact, in mainstream media, in many cases, like even with some of the material published was formally classified, yes. They would coordinate with either CIA or NSA before they published it.
That's right.
So,
right.
So that tells you.
Yeah. So now, when you were with the NSA, did you feel the deep state at work? Do you think it's gotten worse over the years? Do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, they feel, especially, you see, the problem is, especially when they feel threatened. Now, the reason they feel threatened is because President Trump, first of all, he's not a politician.
Yeah.
He doesn't need money, right? He doesn't owe anybody anything.
Right.
And he's interested in doing something for the American people.
Mm-hmm.
Those things are anti to what the deep state wants to have happen.
Yeah.
They want everybody to be controlled. They want to control the money, have all the money, you know, make sure that the media says what they have, and they want to control the presidents and what they do. So I call them the Praetorian Guard, you know.
Right.
They determine who the emperor is and what the emperor does. And that's fundamentally what's going on here. That's what they're trying to do. And they were so afraid of Trump because of they had no control over him. You know,
Absolutely.
This is like a free-flowing cannon on deck. You know, they'll fire anywhere. You know.
Now, this is the politics part is interesting. Have you always been on the Republican side or not?
I actually started out as a Democrat. I was a Democrat for John F. Kennedy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then when Johnson came in and had that Vietnam War going, I could no longer be a Democrat because some nasty things that he did in that war.
Right.
You know, like when the Israelis were shooting up the Liberty ship in the Mediterranean, they knew what they were doing. We had cover on them doing it, saying it, shoot them. You know, they know they're American, shoot them. You know, so we knew that was going on. Well, at the same time, we had an aircraft carrier launch aircraft to give air cover to that ship. And when Lyndon Baines Johnson found out about it, he called them back. He wouldn't let them give air cover. I mean, he did that because he didn't want to embarrass his ally, the Israelis. Well, come on, they're killing our people. What are you doing? You know?
Exactly.
So and then they swore them all to secrecy. You can't tell anything about this, or you go to jail. So that was a travesty. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So at that point, I said I'm not a Democrat.
Yeah.
So I went with Nixon. And then when Nixon did his number, I voted for McGovern.
Right.
And then after McGovern, Ford pardoned Nixon. That was a crime because that meant any president now can do anything he wants because he got a pardon from the next president because he wants to do what he wants to do too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like I got your back, you got my back.
Yeah.
And so I voted for Carter because of that.
Right.
And after Carter, I've been a Republican since.
Yeah.
But you know.
Yeah.
Even there with these Republicans, I haven't voted strictly Republican anyway. In Maryland, I voted for some other Democrats who seem to be doing a good job, you know.
Yeah.
If they had right ideas and good job, I'd vote for them, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, because you were a fierce critic of Cheney and Bush the second. Yeah, you know, I mean, they were. Sorry?
He went to the dark side.
Yeah, and I mean,
he said it, you know.
And they went after you personally as well. I mean, so I know you're not just a kind of a partisan hack or anything, not at all. I mean, but it's interesting the way. I mean, I like to explore this topic with almost everybody because this is what's happening in the world wherever I'm speaking. In France, if I'm speaking to somebody in India, from the States, Germany, whatever, like all the old right and left, you know, divisions. It's not adequate to understand what's going on today and what the real fight is. You know, I think the real fight more is against sort of big corporations, big government, globalism, and people are, you know, they're looking for their communities, for their nations, for their towns, and looking for some sort of integrity and wholeness there instead of being swept up into these big schemes. And I don't think there's a proper terminology for it as yet, and we're still kind of grappling.
Yeah, I look at it as a people's revolution.
Yep.
Because they are so disgusted with what their existing structures, corporations, as well as governments, have been doing to them.
Yeah.
Look at ours. Look what they've done to us. Never-ending wars, you know, in debt up to our ears, you know.
Yeah.
Loss of jobs all around, you know, suffering internally in the United States, bad infrastructure. We're not doing a damn thing about the domestic side of it.
That's right.
You know, and that's what people are really. This is the people's revolution. You people don't serve us well, so we need to fire you and get rid of you.
Yeah.
And I think that's true in France, and it's true in the UK, and spreading.
Yeah, absolutely.
Basically, some of the Muslim revolution that went across Africa into the Middle East.
Yeah,
it was a people's statement of you people have done us really bad.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now I think you see, and this is where I guess I suppose it happens throughout history, just like with that whole Arab Spring you're talking about that was happening in 2000. But I think it was then used, the chaos was used to kind of, reinstate.
That was the deep state.
Yeah.
The deep state said, we need regime change. Where do we need it? Libya, Egypt, Syria,
Exactly.
And it was Hillary Clinton was a part of that, leading the way to that too. So, I mean, she was in that deeply. So
absolutely.
That's why I called her a warmonger.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Trump, Trump was really fighting against both the Republican and the Democratic parties. I mean, he is really an independent.
And the deep state and the mainstream media.
That's right. Exactly.
Because they're all part of this.
Yeah. I mean, his campaign, what do you think? I mean, we know what Trump campaigned on in 2016, and I loved it. I'm presuming you felt an affinity toward it as well. But
Actually,
I don't know if his term reflects everything he said he would do. Well, what's your assessment?
Well, I look at it this way. He's done everything he's promised to do as well as he could do it with the opposition that he's had to get it done.
Yeah.
So I think he's had internal opposition from the deep state, political opposition from both parties, less so the Republicans now, but certainly initially he had a lot of resistance there. So, and he, fortunately, a lot of the things that Obama did to really destroy our economy, were all done by executive order. Now that made it very, very easy for Trump to get rid of. So get rid of regulation by getting rid of those executive orders. So that worked just fine. That was a good healthy shot into our economy.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of and I suppose this is the deep state part of it too. There's a lot of kind of contradictions going on, because one of the things I really supported about Trump coming into office was the his enthusiasm to work with Russia, to work with China, because I mean, really, if China, the U.S., Russia cooperate on a global scale, that will have such a tremendous boost to the global economy, eradication of poverty, development of all. But there's this constant infighting within the cabinet, and then probably in the state structure as well, the deep state and the permanent bureaucracy and all these other things that are pushing for war all the time, war with China, and then
it's profitable.
Sorry?
It's profitable.
Yeah.
Give us the money.
Yeah. So I myself, where do you see? I mean, do you see it as kind of Trump as being a sort of maidenhead or some sort of bulwark of fighting against the deep state, or do you think he's been defeated or bought over? Do you think new forces have to come up? What's your assessment from the inside there?
Well, I think he's basically the champion for change.
Yeah,
I would look at it that way. I saw 3 swindles involved with the American people. The first swindle was give up privacy for security after 9/11. That was the spiel they threw out, and then justifying doing all this spying and all the use of data. I mean, they use this data to drone people around the world.
Yeah.
It's the so we just, even U.S. citizens around the world, we drone them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's been done. So that was the first swindle. We knew internally, NSA, and they knew it too. Hayden knew this also. You didn't have to do bulk acquisition to find the bad guys. Right. We could do that, and we were demonstrating you could do that internally.
Right.
But that wasn't going to be expensive enough. It was going to cost as much. So we had to go, because we needed to build an empire. We needed more money. We needed to satisfy Cheney's need to spy on his political opponents, all of them, and we needed to have power over everybody in the world. So that meant we had bulk acquisition. So the second swindle was cybersecurity. Because you looked at the Vault 7 stuff from CIA, it showed hundreds of millions of lines of source code, tens of thousands of different kinds of attacks on firewalls, operating systems, switches, servers, and networks around the world. Well, that meant that we were all sitting here, fat, dumb, and happy, weak, and open to be attacked. So that when we get attacked, what do? Well, they come out and say, we need more money for cybersecurity.
Right.
Well, if you know about all these weaknesses and you don't fix them and we get attacked because of them, you don't get any money. Until you fix the problems you know, you shouldn't be given any money.
Right.
Once you fix them, then if we get attacked, then sure, you should have money, because then something new is happening. Otherwise, you haven't fixed the problems you already know about. You're leaving them open because that allows you to look in and see what we're saying, right, and what we're doing or planning. Yeah. But if you block them off, they say they can't see it, so therefore you have to keep it open. So they have to be exposed. And when you're attacked, by the way, that's the way we can swindle out of more money. So that was swindle number 2.
Yeah.
Swindle number 3 was this Russiagate thing, with the fabrication of the Whistleblower 2 DC leaks and also the fabricated hack of the DNC. Mm-hmm. The other point I didn't finish about the Whistleblower 2 data with the fingerprints for Russians, Ray McGovern has somebody he knows that said that in the Vault 7 material from CIA is a program called Probable framework. That program for CIA makes it look like somebody else did the attack. So he has somebody who said that program was used once in 2016. And the countries they use it against to make it look like they did the hack are Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, and Arabic countries. Right. So, saying that was done once, and that we have the evidence that the Whistleblower 2 was not a hacker, but that was a fabricator, and he was fabricating data. So right. We had other evidence too, and forensic evidence that could prove this in a court of law, which I submitted in the Roger Stone case because his case was predicated on being associated with the Russian hack. Right. I submitted that affidavit saying that I have forensic evidence that proves that this is a fabrication, right? And that it's not a hack. Mm-hmm. And the judge would not let me testify, not give forensic evidence. Yet they take all this hearsay from the intelligence community or the government, the DOJ, all of this crap. I mean, the point is that Whistleblower 2 was a fabrication. Mueller's report, I mean, he also had the IRA, the Internet Research Agency in there from St. Petersburg in Russia, called them a troll of the Russian government. Well, they decided to send lawyers into the courts on the case and challenge that statement because they said we're not associated with the Russian government. And the US government couldn't prove diddly squat to show that they were. And so the judge said, you basically chastised them for fabricating a statement about a company being associated with the Russian government when it wasn't. So the IRA, the trolls, the Whistleblower 2 and DC leaks were the primary basis for Mueller's report and Rosenstein's indictment. All of that was fabricated. So you can see these fabrications of the Mueller report and the fabrication of the Rosenstein indictment. So all of it is a fabrication. And it all points back, all the evidence that we have points back to the use of Probable framework to make that happen, at least in the case of Whistleblower 2. Right. And the internal downloads for the DNC prove there wasn't a hack. So, the whole thing was fabricated.
Yeah. With all this, evidence you're showing and the evidence you have that can, put an end to so much speculation and yet it's not being used. It really can make someone want to give up, saying, listen, we've been defeated. Is there anything we can do? Listen, you have all this forensic evidence that proves X, Y, Z, yet it's being totally ignored. They can do whatever they want. Do you think that we are in a almost hopeless situation, or do you think that there's a way out?
Actually, not. The saving grace is the internet.
Yeah,
because that's the way to get that's the way to get information, the truth out to people.
Yeah.
Not necessarily depend on Facebook or Google or any of them. Use your own, find your own websites and go directly to those sites. Bypass those people because they'll filter you.
Yeah, yeah. They're now they are now the big censors. Yeah.
Yeah. So they'll shadow. It's called shadow blocking, I guess. Now.
Shadow banning sometimes. Yeah, yeah. I'm shadow banned on YouTube.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, but that's the way. They just find the links to the sites and go on the web and go directly to them and bypass those people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you are old school. You know what it was like before the internet. When we had to get this type of what to call it, information that wasn't authorized. There are ways. I mean, we got spoiled by the internet because it was so amazing. You could for a good maybe 10, 20 years, the internet was a pretty free space, and you could have gotten stuff you never would have seen before. And now it's tightening again. It's almost becoming like what the mainstream media used to be.
But outlets like yours and others like that, I mean, that's the way people can get in the truth now. It's not the fabrications in the mainstream media. And that's, I think, why they're losing viewership. I mean, their viewership is declining because people are recognizing they're being fed a bunch of lies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, you might be able to help a little bit more about the structure of the internet and the way it works, because I'm really wondering myself when I look at the history of the mainstream media, of the 3 television stations over the world, how it was in the 50s and 60s and 70s even. You had those stations controlling all information.
Vertical structure, yeah.
And then the internet was an amazing opening but it seems like they want to put the internet back into the space. And now even Russia and China are sort of building their own parallel internets. What do you see as happening in the future? Yeah.
Okay, well, the potential for this is going to get immensely worse.
Yeah.
Simply because it's not, we're moving toward the Internet of Things.
Yeah.
And so that's going to make it all possible to see many more things, many more actions of people at many different levels, even the power use in your house, what you're doing in your house, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's a very dangerous set of circumstances that we're moving toward. And so we need to, and we don't have anybody smart enough in Congress to understand what to do about it. Okay.
Yeah.
So they don't know what to do. The law enforcement can't do anything until they take some action and say this is illegal or not. So they're kind of stuck. And so we're looking at basically a freewheeling and freely developing system that's not monitored and not really controlled. There's no oversight of it, really. Yeah. So that's why you have what they call the dark web.
Yeah.
I call that the unindexed web.
Right.
Okay. It's not dark. It goes on the light, right? On the fiber. Right. This is captured. All of it is captured by NSA and the Five Eyes and about 9 other countries, and all fed into NSA for storage. So everything on the line. But you see, that's why the mainstream media also hate Trump, because he uses Twitter. And he goes right by them, right?
Yeah.
So, and they don't have control of what he says or how they can spin it. Exactly. He goes directly to the people. So, that's a guy who's not controllable by by that part of the deep state.
That's right. Yeah. And I mean, so I suppose that it looks like the internet is going to break up, though. Do you think so? Like into a Russian internet, a Chinese internet,
but that's going to be an expensive thing to do, So it's not going to be cheap for them to do it. So I'm not sure the scale of it is going to match what we have today. Yeah,
exactly. So I am not sure how the future of the thing is going to go, but there's definitely a fight over the internet right now because because all the censorship that's been going on, especially since the Trump era, has been you can really see that this is where the whole term fake news came from, right? I mean, they were originally trying to use it against Trump and Trump supporters, and then Trump turned it around against them. And this is where, you know, people like yourself,
Yeah.
who have been smeared by the mainstream media, have been shut out.
Yeah, but you see, I consider that a badge of honor because I'm being smeared by the mentally impaired people of this country.
Exactly.
Okay, they are mentally impaired by their own thinking, by their own. They can't even recognize what a fact is between a fact and an opinion. They can't even distinguish. Like, for example, if the impeachment goes to the Senate, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court will be in charge of making sure it's done legally.
Yeah.
So that means that all the hearsay evidence that the House and Democrats have put together will be thrown out of court as inadmissible.
Yeah.
Hearsay is not admissible in the court of law.
Yeah.
So they have absolutely no facts. The only fact they had was one ambassador sitting there saying, yeah, he said, what do you want from them? He said, Trump said, I don't want anything from them. I know quid pro quo. You know, I don't want any of that from them. So that's the only fact that's admissible. The rest of it isn't.
Yeah. I mean,
especially when you know the original whistleblower. I mean, I looked at this guy. I mean, we know he's from CIA, right? And he's he worked with Biden and Schiff and all Democrats basically.
Yeah.
And he was anti-Trump and all of that. And he's making all these hearsay allegations, all in secret. You know, he never comes out to say anything. Well, I take that to my case. I was out there talking to these people, not just Democrats, but you know.
Yeah.
Inspector generals of the Department of Defense and the Department of Justice. You know, those are the proper channels.
That's right.
Now, what the Inspector General of the Department of Defense did said, okay, this is my purview in NSA, so I'm going to investigate. So he sent a set of 12 people to do an investigation into NSA based on our complaint.
Right.
They found out everything we said was true, and they documented that, and they redacted it all because they didn't want anybody to know.
That was what year?
That was the publication came out in January of 2005.
Okay.
They ran their investigation from February of 2003 through 2004. So, and it came out with like 115 or 20 pages of report, all of it justified, and it really showed the corruption and fraud inside NSA and also the criminality. So, that report was one of the ones I referred Director Pompeo to when he was director of CIA. If he didn't, I told him that all of his intelligence agencies were lying to him and the president.
You're right.
I thought I should not pull any punches, you know?
Yeah.
I said, they're lying to you. And he said he found it hard to believe that all these hardworking, dedicated, patriotic people, yeah, sure, like the ones at the FBI or DOJ, yeah, sure, yeah. Tell me all about it. Well, I said, you don't have to believe me. Just go read this report. It's called 05-Intel-03, issued in January of 2005 by the Inspector General of the Department of Defense. You want to know what lying is going on? It's right in there. They even lied to the inspectors. I mean, they fabricated data for the inspectors as well. Yeah. But the difference is they caught them. Why? Because Tom Drake was internally in NSA.
Yeah.
He was giving them copies of the original reports that were made about what we were complaining about. So they had the original reports, and then they got the polished version from NSA, and they could see exactly what they changed. Mm-hmm. It was all trying to make them look better, right? So that was basically lying to them too. So you know, this is typical of the military intelligence, governmental think tank. Right,
yeah.
Banker.
Yeah,
Silicon Valley conglomeration of the deep state.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've been at this for a really long time, trying to expose the wrongdoing, the lies of the American government.
Not just our government. I testified to the House of Lords.
Right.
Also in the Bundestag in Germany.
Okay.
But right. Let me tell you something about the Bundestag testimony. When I was testifying to the committee investigating the B&D, which is NSA, CIA equivalent for them.
Right.
the chairman of the committee, when I was in the midst of testifying, stopped it and said, "Now I'd like to welcome members of the U.S. government to the committee hearing." What they were doing is they sent members from the House and Senate Intelligence Committees over to Berlin,
right,
to give my testimony to the Bundestag, when I'm only 20 miles up the road and they won't have me down to testify to them.
right, right.
Well, again, it gets back to plausible deniability.
That's right. Yeah.
Because they also, like Pelosi, you know, the first people who were approving this bulk acquisition on domestic spying on everybody, violations of the Constitution, the First, Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments.
Yeah.
They were the chairman and the ranking members of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, and they were briefed, I think it was the 4th of November of 2001 on this program. The House side was, the chair was Goss, the ranking member was Pelosi.
Right.
Pelosi approved the program when she was briefed. So that meant when she became Speaker of the House and they wanted, Kucinich wanted to put, articles of impeachment into the House of Bush and Cheney, she said impeaching George Bush is off the table. The reason she said that was she was already culpable in all these programs.
Yeah.
And yet she has the gall to come out there recently and say we abide by our Constitution.
Yeah.
What a hypocrite. A lying hypocrite is what she is.
Exactly. I mean, not wanting to impeach Bush for his clear
well, she approved violations of the Constitution by approving these programs.
Yeah. I mean, what do you see as your sort of end game that that you've been clearly working, with great sacrifice. You've been putting great effort into this, and what is your ultimate goal? I mean, is it actually to dismantle the deep state?
Yes.
I know that's what we love, but is that's
it's technically possible too. It's technically possible to do that. It's technically possible to do to find all the bad guys and respect everybody in the world, their privacy. Everywhere. I mean, It's all based on, again, going back to behavioral, people behaving in a way that gives us probable cause to look at them.
Right.
That can be easily defined, and we have done that already. And so it wouldn't be difficult to do that, and also purge all the rest of the data that wasn't relevant. Right. Now, you see, there's a little secret here that nobody's saying. That by collecting all of this data into NSA and the Five Eyes and what have you around the world, what happens is they can't see a threat coming. There's just too much data to get through.
Yeah.
This is why we did the program we did in the 90s, because even back then there was too much data.
Yeah.
And witness 9/11 happening, there was too much data. They couldn't see it. So, and every attack since then and before that, the same is the truth. They were all these people were known for bad behavior and known to be affiliated with some criminal activity, but nobody could see the threat coming. Yeah. That's true in Europe, in Asia, and U.S., all around.
Yeah.
And even internally from NSA, MI5, GCHQ, in the Snowden material, there are documented memos written internally by the analysts saying we are overburdened by overload.
Yeah.
And we can't see the threat coming. There's just too much data. And they're saying that internally. Now, these are the people who have to do the recognition of the threat.
Yeah.
If they don't recognize the threat, nothing is stopped. You don't have a chance to stop the threat.
That's right.
So that's why I was saying, focus into a professional discipline job based on behavioral properties that justify probable cause and allow you to pull together and principles, deductive, inductive, abductive principles that allow you to pull together relevant data that creates a rich environment for analysts to succeed at stopping threats.
Right. So in other words, not only is it ethical and moral, it's actually more effective.
It is effective. The current system is not effective.
That's right. Yeah. So both on a very practical ground and an ethical, moral ground, it's a win-win on both sides.
And there's a side benefit.
Yeah.
It's a lot cheaper.
Yeah. Well, there you go. And the economics match.
Yeah.
So, I mean that. So, if to argue against that would, I don't know what argument you can make against that. To be honest, I don't think there is one. You know.
No, even their own people are saying that having the same problems, and they're not addressing them. Because again, there's just too much money involved. Look at all the money. I mean, we're spending over $100 billion a year on the intelligence community. Now, what do we get out of that? And that's why I told them they were lying to them. I told Pompeo they were lying to him, because here we are sitting at home looking at Google and going out, looking at websites, looking at data. We spend maybe $1,000 a piece doing it. Of our own effort. And here we're spending over $100 billion on this intelligence, and they're not telling you that.
That's right.
How effective is that spending?
Exactly.
Right. So that's why I've been publishing in other documents with other people saying we should cut the intelligence community budget by 70%.
Right. Well, that's not going to get you friends.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, the program, let me give you the statistics. The program we developed, we did for $3,200,000.
Yeah.
The initial 5-year development did the same thing under the Trailblazer program promoted by General Hayden, the director of NSA, was requesting $3.8 billion. That's more than 1,000 times what it cost us to do it from beginning to end and have it implemented on 3 sites 24 hours a day.
Wow.
So, you could see the magnitude of the money. We even knew that companies that were trying to get contracts with NSA to do that were in the committees, the intelligence committees downtown in Washington, lobbying against our internal program at NSA because it was already solved the problem. And if that was known and accepted, then the problem was solved, and they wouldn't be able to get all that money, all the billions.
Yeah.
So that meant that the companies wouldn't be able to feed on all that money. So that's why they were down there lobbying against it. So this is the deep state in action here and how it operates.
Whenever I speak to people, like yourself, who've sacrificed so much, who've stood up against, very, very, very powerful interests, and you've put yourself at risk, really. I always am interested in what personally drives you toward, because most people would say, listen, they're too scared to do that, they don't want to do that, but for some people it's a deep faith in God. For some people it's a deep philosophical commitment. What drives you? What gives you your strength?
I guess I would take it back to where I grew up. I grew up in a very small town, about 3,000 people in Pennsylvania, central western Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. Everybody knew everybody, and if you really messed up, everybody knew that. And so therefore, you were kind of on the spot to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And it really became a community thing. It was a community. You do it for the community. You do the right things to be a good standing member of the community.
Right.
And so when you do that, it was not so much a religious thing as it was a community thing, and the fact of knowing people and doing the right thing for people.
Yeah.
That instilled that in me, and that took that into the military and also into NSA.
Yeah. So it's a deep sort of sense of your character, and it's been ingrained in you.
And moral decisions. You don't hurt people. You don't do things like that. If you can possibly stay away from that, do it.
Yeah.
So, and that's why I viewed my intelligence work was to be sure that I got the right information to leadership, so they didn't make mistakes by doing like LBJ did, start a war in Vietnam with the Tonkin Gulf affair that didn't happen, or like we do weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. That didn't happen.
Yeah.
So I just thought it was important to get the right knowledge in the right place so that the right decisions could be made.
Absolutely. And speaking to young people a lot, they talk about the post-privacy world where everybody shares everything on Facebook and Instagram and whatever else is new. I'm probably out of date on some of the newer stuff as well. But everybody, there's a sense that, listen, well, if I'm not doing anything wrong, then I have nothing to worry about. And they're so addicted to their smartphones and all this stuff that they're willing to sacrifice their privacy so they can have this little gadget. And
I like to add a little quote.
Sorry?
I'd like to add a little quote here from that
Sure.
little statement. I'm not doing anything wrong. I have nothing to fear.
Yeah.
That's a direct quote from Joseph Goebbels,
Right.
propaganda minister for Adolf Hitler in the Nazi.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a direct quote from him.
Exactly.
And that was how they buffaloed everybody to acquiesce like a herd of sheep
Exactly.
into doing what they wanted to happen.
Yeah, because and a lot of young people seem to not be driven. I mean, obviously there are some who are, and I guess anybody who might be looking at this podcast will be driven to a certain extent. But I'd like to ask you, what would be your advice to young people who are faced with this world right now and who want to do something about it?
See, I will not participate in things like Facebook or any social network until the rules are out in the open and discussed and everybody knows what the rules are. You don't know what they are now.
Yeah. And
because
they change it all the time.
Even the government doesn't know what they are because the companies are setting the rules internally.
Yeah.
So so I don't participate in that stuff because in fact I'm an advocate for coming down on them really hard as monopolies and actually manipulating the people in the country. So my point would be to come down on them really like monopoly, breaking them up. So and making sure that the rules are not set by them as to what gets shadow blocked or not. Yeah. The rules are set by everybody, and that everybody has a voice in that. Right now, we don't. And so I don't participate in that.
Yeah.
I mean, I looked at Facebook, and this guy has 1.5 billion people working for him for nothing.
That's right.
They weren't getting paid. He's taking advantage of all this advertising to them based on what they like or what they say. And, companies are paying him for doing it.
That's right.
And all these people are doing this work, and he's taking advantage of leveraging it. It's like they're slave labor.
That's right. That's right.
I don't do that.
Far more effective than any spy equipment you could have made. I mean, everybody's voluntarily saying where they are, what they eat, who their friends are, what they like, everything.
There you go.
Yeah. Now, I know
I never press the button like or dislike anything. I never give my opinion of anything on any time I'm on the web.
Yeah.
I'm looking there for research. I don't care about it. I'm not interested in telling you what I think, because then you can get into my thinking, my mind, and try to manipulate me. I'm not going to let you do that. Sorry.
That's right. I mean, you've already made that sort of a behavior analysis kind of software, so
I did that myself, for many decades. So I already know how that works.
Exactly. So, I mean, I know you have your appearances like this and elsewhere, and you have your companies. Do you have any particular plans over the next year, 5 years that you'd like us to know about?
Well, yeah. At the moment, I'm trying to fix the voting process here in the country. Ways and means of doing that. But I'm also trying to help the Department of Justice get to the truth behind all of this crap that we're facing.
Okay.
And I'm trying to assist in many other ways. Okay. So any number of ways I can through.
So do you have still good contacts and relationship within the government, within the Department of Justice and other places? Or do they all shun you like you're a traitor and the plague or what?
Yeah, the establishment treats me like that. Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to make sure that everybody that needs to gets the information to put these people in jail.
Yeah.
Because that's where they belong.
That's right. Well, I definitely wish you luck in that because it's something we need.
If we don't do this, our democracy and republic are pretty much shot.
Absolutely. And the whole world needs it to happen. The whole world needs it to happen.
See, we started this crap, so if we can correct it here, we can fix the rest of the world. They'll follow us. Absolutely. Like they did before. They went down the dark side with Cheney and all the stuff that started from that, went through Obama, and he doubled down on it. So Everybody followed our lead. So, and besides, we are the storage facility for the entire world that's involved in this.
That's right. That's
because
right.
nobody else has the money to pay for all these, like the 1 million square foot facility in Utah, or the 2.8 million square foot facility they're building over here in Fort Meade.
Right.
Nobody has the money to do that except for us.
Exactly.
And so, and then the Brits, whenever they, and all the others, the Five Eyes and all the other countries involved, when they collect data, they forward it to NSA for storage. And,
yes.
and then they interrogate it using programs called XKeyscore and IC Reach.
Mm-hmm.
Now, IC Reach is used by the Five Eyes and the departments of the U.S. government, FBI, CIA, DOJ,
right.
and DHS primarily. But others have access to it too. When Obama opened it up to everybody, now they all have that. All those departments of the IC have access directly into the NSA database.
Right.
With no attempt at oversight.
Wow.
When is the last time you heard of the oversight of FBI agents in going and interrogating the NSA database?
Yeah.
You don't. The only ones you hear about are NSA analysts looking into that data, and they got good controls on that.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, and it got embarrassed a couple of times when they found out that NSA analysts were checking out on their lovers to see if they were cheating on them in that database. Now that tells you the extent of the content collection down to the local phone calls.
Yeah.
You know, how can you check on your lover locally if they're cheating on you on data they're communicating with people, unless you do and have the local communications?
That's right.
Stored.
And then how can they find that data but yet not other?
Yeah. Well, again, here's the difference. When you're after your lovers, you know who they are, you know what their data is. You go directly out. But if you're trying to find a terrorist coming in to kill somebody or do something, you have to look at the whole spectrum.
That's right. It's like a needle in a haystack.
You're right.
Yeah, and you're right. And then the more data you collect, you're making the haystack bigger and bigger and bigger. And
it's orders of magnitude more than it was in the 90s. So
yeah.
I mean,
well, I want to thank you so much, not only for this interview, but really for all your work and determination, your persistence, your intelligence, your and your moral crusade. I think it's I think it's really important, and I want to thank you for sticking with it, for continuing, and for pushing it forward, because you've been doing so much important work.
Thank you.
That's all for Independent Thought and Freedom this week. Please join us again next week. And in the meanwhile, make sure you subscribe, leave me a rating, and like and share this podcast with your friends. Thanks, and bye for now.